U.S. Congressman John Lewis has been a resounding voice. Oh, that's Bill Clinton talking, I'm sorry. Congressman John Lewis is an American hero, a key figure of the civil rights movement. His journey has taken him from an Alabama sharecroppers farm to the halls of Congress, from a segregated school to the 1963 March on Washington, and from receiving beatings from state troopers and others to receiving the Medal of Freedom from the first African-American president. Mr. Lewis's 1998 book, Walking with the Wind, a memoir of the movement, has been called the definitive account of the civil rights era. His new book is March, Book 1. It features something all of us clearly would like, a blurb from Bill Clinton, and I'll read you that now. Congressman John Lewis has been a resounding voice in the quest for equality for more than 50 years, and I'm so pleased that he is sharing his memories of the civil rights movement with America's young leaders. In March, that's the book title, he brings a whole new generation with him from across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, from a past of clenched fists into a future of outstretched hands. Congressman John Lewis.
Good morning. Thank you, Chris, my friend, my brother, for those kind words of introduction. I'm delighted and very pleased to be here with these three distinguished authors, great writers. Now, you heard Chris tell you that I'm the son of sharecroppers. I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. Growing up on the farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens, and I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chickens. I won't tell you the whole story, it's too long to tell. But from time to time as a little boy, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, like you're gathered here in this hall. And we would have church. The chickens, along with my brothers and sisters and cousins, would help make up the audience, the congregation. And I would start speaking or preaching, and when I look back on it, some of these chickens would bow their heads, some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I preached to during the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. As a matter of fact, some of those chickens were just a little more productive. At least they produce eggs. Well, that story is one of the stories told in this book. So some of you may be asking, John Lewis, why are you trying to write a comic book? Why did you write a graphic novel? I decided to write a graphic novel because I have hope that someday in the future some young girl or boy will pick it up, read the words, and see the pictures, and they will be inspired. The graphic novel is called March for a reason. I believe it is time to do a little more marching. I believe it is time for us to move our feet. Dr. King once said, there's nothing more powerful than the marching feet of a determined people. It is time for us to make some noise. It's time for us to march again. My mother and my father and my grandparents and great-grandparents would tell me when I was there, why this, why that? Why those signs? Saying white only, colored only, white waiting, colored waiting, white men, colored men. That's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But this march, led by Martin Luther King Jr., that march that Rosa Parks got in when she took that seat on that bus by sitting down, she was standing up. I got in trouble. I was inspired to get in trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble. I want to inspire through this book, March, another generation of young men, young women, black, white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, to march again for what is right, for what is fair, for what is just. Some of you may not be old enough to remember, but back in 1957, there was a little book called, well, most of you were not even born. How can you remember? You were not even a dream. A little book was published called Martin Luther King Jr. and the Montgomery Story. It told the story of the Montgomery bus boycott, the story of Rosa Parks, the story of more than 50,000 people boycotting buses in 1955 and 56. And that book, that little book, was picked up by a young student in Greensboro, North Carolina. He read the book and started sitting in with 3 other students. And then we read the book in Nashville, Tennessee, and we started sitting in. This book had been translated, little book. It cost only 10 cents back in 1957. Been translated into more than 4 languages. And it's helped lead and inspire people in the Middle East, in Vietnam, especially in Egypt. I want to see young people here in America feel the spirit of the 1960s and find a way to get in the way, to find a way to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. This book, March, also tells several other stories. One day we were sitting in Nashville, a group of us as young black and white students from Fisk University, Tennessee State, Vanderbilt University, and a young waitress came up and said, "We don't serve in." You know what I mean when I say in? No, you don't. She said, "We don't serve niggers." And one of the young people said, "We don't eat them." This book tells the story of how we studied the way of Gandhi, studied the way of Martin Luther King Jr., studied the way of Thoreau and civil disobedience. Before we went on any sit-in on the Freedom Ride, the march from Selma to Montgomery, the march on Washington, we prepared ourselves. And many of us grew to accept the philosophy of nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. This book will come out in 3 volumes. It will be published on August 13th. It is my hope that elementary school students, middle school, high school students, college students, parents will pick it up, read it, pass it on. It is time for us to teach all of our people the way of love, the way of peace, the way of nonviolence, to have faith, and never, ever give up or lose hope. Read it, enjoy it, and walk with the wind and march again. Thank you very much.